On location from Cake's house watching the playoffs. Thought we'd jump on a pod and talk about the rest of the play-in losers that are now a part of the lottery. Had a Golden State Warriors episode, so the remaining play-in losers are the Clippers, the Charlotte Hornets, and the Miami Heat. So Cake is here joining me to talk about those three teams. Specifically, if we were running those teams, what would we do this offseason? Let's start with the Hornets.
Okay.
Charlotte, I had an episode earlier in the season about what a mess they are. And that was when we were hearing LaMelo Ball trade rumors, some discontent coming from his camp. Whispers were out there being leaked saying, LaMelo would love to be traded. And to me, that was legitimate because they had yet to make the playoffs, or I think they only made it once in his career. And I think that teams, rather than focusing on tanking and rebuilding so much, need to prioritize getting playoff experience for their young players. Hornets went on to have an excellent end of the season, playing at a very high level for at least the back half of the season, but basically from a record perspective, up there with the best teams in the East. They look good, but they do not make the playoffs, obviously. And so my criticism still stands that this team still does not have enough playoff experience, in my opinion. Do you have any comment on that approach to evaluating this Charlotte Hornets season, or are you thrilled if you're the Charlotte Hornets GM?
Well, I think you have to be happy if you're the Charlotte Hornets GM because they were drafting in the top 7 and they nailed the draft pick. Con Knipple was awesome. He's definitely not the rookie of the year. Cooper Flagg is definitely the rookie of the year, but they nailed that draft pick. So then you're looking at how this team is looking moving forward, and they're very perimeter heavy with Lonzo and Brandon Miller on the perimeter, and they led the league in 3-pointers made, 3-pointers shot, number 1 and 2 in 3-pointers made with LaMelo and I believe it was Con.
Yeah.
So very impressive in that aspect. But that being said, they're also have a major weakness inside. So if you're looking at how this approach worked for Charlotte, I think it made sense because it's not like there was any big time big man that they were going to get in like the top 5 of the draft that was going to change their trajectory as a team. So I think it made sense to, put your foot on the gas and try to get some playoff experience. The playoff experience didn't really work out well for them, did it?
No, and my criticism of them, as I said, still stands. I think that they needed to acquire an all-star or potential all-star caliber veteran to improve their chances of making the playoffs. Now, could they have ended with a better record than Philly or Orlando? Maybe that wasn't realistic anyway, and they did that math and said it's probably unlikely. But I think that this team is well suited to make a trade like that, particularly for an asset that's maybe overpaid, because LaMelo Ball is their highest paid player, right in the $40 million range for the next few years. You've got the next 3 highest paid contracts. I'm looking at it here in front of me. Miles Bridges is expiring next year at 22.8. Josh Green, 14.6. Grant Williams, 14.2. All expiring next year. So that's like $52 million there, all expiring next year. I mentioned Sabonis before. Now, a lot of fans think Sabonis is trash. I don't know how you feel about Sabonis. He gets a lot of shit talk, but that's the kind of guy that they could get very, very easily and would instantly raise the profile of the team to pair with that trio of perimeter players that you mentioned. So it doesn't have to be him, but I think that they should capitalize on this opportunity to acquire an overpaid, potentially all-star caliber player to improve their chances of getting some playoff experience for these guys. I think they can't afford to have another year not making the playoffs.
Yeah, so I don't disagree with you on that. I was just more commenting on this year's playoff experience was very horrible for them. I mean, Con Knipple was awful. Like literally awful. He was a detriment to their team. He made them worse. I've never seen him shoot
in the Orlando game.
In both games, he was awful. And he was a detriment to both of their teams. I mean, the first game, they didn't even play him down the stretch because he was unplayable. So they had Kobe White out there, and then they pulled off that miraculous comeback. And then you had LaMelo hitting the layup to advance on, again, a miracle over the Miami Heat. So I don't know if this playoff experience was a positive for them because Con was so bad, as was Brandon Miller, and LaMelo was absolutely atrocious in the Magic series. So, yes, they got a couple more games of meaningful reps, but those meaningful reps ended up exposing all the flaws of those players. Now, that being said,
That's a good thing.
moving forward, they have three potential first rounders in 2027. They have Miami's pick. They also have their own pick, and they have Dallas's first round pick. That's protected 1 to 2. So they have a lot of picks available to them in 2027, and Dallas's 1 to 2 could be incredibly valuable. So I'm interested. Do you think they'd be willing to part with or package any of those potential first rounders in 2027, which is not going to be as great of a draft as this draft, to either get an asset or move up in the draft?
Yeah, I think that that's definitely a possibility, and here's what, and that gets to what I'm saying, that I don't think they should look to solve this in the draft. I think that they should prioritize getting somebody that produces immediately, not necessarily somebody old, because they have a very good package to offer a team who's looking to dump some sort of high price player. Earlier, we were talking about the Knicks and Karl Anthony Towns. Could Charlotte benefit from having Karl Anthony Towns?
Mm,
Not that necessarily what they're offering is appealing to the Knicks, but I just mean something like that where they could put a lot of different ideas together of somebody to target. And I think that it's easiest to do that with the center position, where you have teams that would maybe be looking to move on from a center. We talked about Şengün earlier. Is that somebody that they could potentially get? I don't know. I think Sabonis is the easiest to acquire. And that's why I said, you probably don't even have to include picks, or if you do, it's not a very valuable one. You could give them the protected Miami pick, something like that. I think that'd be pretty easy to acquire. Anthony Davis, where were they on the Anthony Davis trade? Instead, you let Washington scoop him up. They have room on their cap sheet for a big, expensive contract like that because their team is so young. There's a window of opportunity here to make an acquisition like that.
agreed. And I think they're on the precipice. I don't know how close they are to being real, like true competitors in the East. I still like the Atlanta Hawks future ahead of them. I still like Philadelphia's future ahead of them with how Philadelphia hit on Edgecombe and they have Maxey. The Cavaliers are the one team where it's like, that's an aging team. We don't know what's going to happen with Donovan Mitchell. I know he's committed to the team. I'm not saying he's going to get traded, but that's a team that could fall apart fairly
It's
quickly.
teetering a bit, yeah.
And then you have obviously Boston and Detroit, who seem to be their foundation seems to be more solid, although we're seeing Detroit struggling with a already struggling Magic team. So I do see some ability for them to get into that realm of teams, but they're very far away from it based on their current makeup.
Okay. So in that case, then why wouldn't they instead package the draft picks and try to target getting a center in the draft? Or is that even an area of need for them? Because one thing I bring up quite often on this podcast is that a good value for a team is to treat the center position as a revolving door because of how perimeter oriented the league has gotten. And a place to save money on the cap sheet is at the center position. Now, I think that's kind of a glaring weakness in their lineup, and that they, as I said, they have the room to take on an expensive contract, somebody that's overpaid. So I think they're in a unique position to get somebody pretty easily. But yeah, if you look at the playoff picture in the East, whose spot are they taking? Could they end up with a better record than Toronto next year, for example?
Yeah.
Maybe someone like that. Or maybe the Knicks do some crazy thing this offseason and they end up falling out of the picture. I don't know. But that should color the decision making for Charlotte, that how aggressive are we going to be, because how realistic is it for actually us to move up in the standings? We had the same conversation about Orlando when they made the Bain trade. Does this actually improve your chances of being a top 4 seed? They ended up with basically the same seed they had last year because it's a bit crowded in the East.
So I think moving up in the draft to go target a particular player is interesting. The problem is people love this draft, so it's going to be very hard to move up into those positions where teams would be willing to trade those picks. And then building on top of that, the majority of the great players in this draft right now are primarily perimeter players. Outside of Cam Boozer, you have Darren Peterson, AJ DeBanza, you have Darius Acuff. It's a lot of guards, so it's kind of a repetition of the players that they have already. Even like a Caleb Wilson, somebody like that, who's just, again, a repetition of Brandon Miller. So I don't necessarily know if they're going to resolve their issue in the draft. Their best chance is to kind of get that big time big man that can supplement their offense via the 2027 draft picks that they have, 3 of which are first rounders. But I don't know if anybody's available for them.
I was just looking at all of the teams, and it's like I mentioned Sabonis. Depending on the fallout from this Houston situation, we don't know what they're going to do or not do.
Like, you know who would have been a player I would
Maybe,
have loved if they would have grabbed is like Jaren Jackson Jr.
yeah. Like,
And
where were they in that
yeah,
conversation?
they didn't go get him. So it's like, the Jazz scooped him up for whatever they
So,
gave
yeah,
him.
who's the guy that's actually out there for them? It's tough to identify that player.
Sabonis is the obvious one, but I don't know if Sabonis solves their issue because he's such a poor defender
Yeah.
and he's largely just kind of a big guy who gets rebounds and points. So I don't know if it solves their issue. So they're kind of they're kind of in limbo right now. So I'm curious what they're going to do.
My thinking with the Sabonis thing is, can we recreate the light the beam thick team that the Sacramento Kings got them the 3 seed? And like, I think it's that important for Charlotte to just get themselves in the mix in the playoffs. And you really learn more about your team when you see them in a series and about your coaching. I would want that context about LaMelo, about Con Knipple. Like you said, we saw him shrink in those playing games. Both players underperformed. In some respects over the combination of the 2 games. I'm prioritizing making the playoffs if I'm them. I don't really just want to keep rebuilding. So
Yeah,
they're in a
there are 2 guys that got traded during the season that I would have loved to have gotten on if I was the Hornets, right? It's Zubac and Jaren Jackson. Those 2 would have been very good fits for
yeah,
them.
that's a good call out. Where were they on Zubats? But they didn't have the Matherin to offer as well as the potentially top 4 picks. So they probably were going to have a hard time outbidding the Pacers anyway. What about a guy like Daniel Gafford? Is that even worth it? Dallas may not be interested in keeping him.
Yeah, maybe, but I don't know if that moves the needle that much for them.
Yeah, if you're Charlotte, it's like, well, we have Diabate, we have Kalkbrenner. This needs to be an upgrade over a meaningful upgrade over them. But like I said, they have these expiring contracts. So there's a window here where I think they're going to make a move. We're not sure who exactly is going to be available yet. Could they even target somebody to upgrade the Miles Bridges spot? Could they acquire
Mm.
a perimeter oriented power forward and then just keep this revolving door of young centers?
Yeah, I don't think that that's going to happen. I honestly think that the Hornets are going to view this season as just a step in the right direction. We have an identity. Our identity right now is LaMelo, Khan, and Brandon Miller,
Yeah.
who on paper, their plus and minus when they were all playing together was one of the top 5 teams in the league in terms of offensive production. So I don't think that they're going to jeopardize that identity. They're probably, and Miles Bridges is a very good player. I just don't know what players are out there and there's certainly none in the draft, at least in terms of the top guys where they would need to sacrifice draft picks to move up. And there's nobody out there in terms of free agency or on the trade rumor situation that would, move the needle in terms of making them better on the backcourt end, or the front court end. So I think they're probably going to end up running this back with some moves on the peripherals and just seeing how this team develops.
One idea I have for them is somebody like a Nick Claxton,
Mm-hmm.
where this is an overpaid contract, in my opinion, for Nick Claxton. He's making like $25 million a year. But as I said, Charlotte doesn't care about that. They could do something like that where they have the contracts to put together to make an acquisition like this.
I like that.
We'll see what they do. But I I agree with you in large part that they don't really need to be in a rush, but I do think they need to try to make the playoffs and not treat this as we're gonna look at the 2027 draft. They have those 3 picks, one of whom is Dallas, like you said. I I think they really need to try to make the playoffs, and I think they're going to. So we'll see, and we'll see what veterans become available. There's undoubtedly going to be somebody who becomes available.
Well, we know they're going to try to make the playoffs because they made the playoffs this year and they made a huge second half push just to get in there. So,
I think they need a 7-game series under their belts.
yeah,
That's what I'm
it's
saying.
just going to be tough to crack that top 6 because I love Atlanta. I love, and then you still have the Knicks, you still have Detroit, you still have Boston,
Indiana will be back.
Indiana, and you have the Cavs. So right there, that's 6 teams that, assuming, Fat Albert gets skinny again, despite all the shingles issues, the Pacers should be good. And I didn't mean that as a shot at Tyrese Halliburton. I would hate to have to deal with what he's dealing with. It sounds like he's gone through a lot, but
You
he,
called him Fat Albert.
yeah, I know, but he, hey, hey, hey,
It sounds
uh,
like a shot.
he gained 30 pounds, and I don't know what that's going to look like coming out the rip for this next season. I don't think you should just expect this Pacers team to just look like the same Pacers team that we saw competing with the Thunder in the finals. And you really should not. So,
Yeah, so really the likely candidates, if they were going to replace somebody, is, and you assume Indiana's going to be in the mix, so I swap them and potentially Philly. Really,
yeah.
Toronto would have to fall out. I
And
can't really see the other teams
I
falling
forgot
out of
about
the
that.
picture.
Philly and Toronto, and you have Orlando that's going to have to run it back out of necessity because
And,
they don't really
like,
have an option. I mean,
Miami's going to be there.
yeah, Miami's going to be there. God knows if Miami makes a trade for Giannis, they could absolutely do that. Too
It's
many,
crowded.
too many things to think about how the balls are going to drop here, but I think they're just going to run it back and keep running these three, hoping that Kalkbrenner, Diabate develop, and seeing what might fall to them. Just because the free agents and the players on the trade market coming into this offseason, as we're sitting here today on April 25th, they don't really resolve their issues.
I'm definitely at the minimum taking on a bad contract if I'm them. If you can leverage some of these expirings you have to get an additional asset in a way that's not going to impact your rotation, they have room on their books to absorb a big contract for the next couple of years. There was all the talk at the Desmond Bain trade about how valuable it was for the Magic to get off that KCP contract.
Right,
If there's a team with a situation like that, you should be calling them if you're Charlotte.
right.
But yeah, outside of that, they're in a good spot, and we'll see what how the rest of the teams look, if it's even going to be realistic for them to get a 7 or 8 seed.
I don't know if I'd necessarily say it's a good spot. They're in an interesting spot because I do think the East is going to get a lot better outside of the Cavs.
Well, I like their trio that they're building around.
Yeah, it's
That's
just
a
very offensive forward, and they were exposed in 2 games in the playoffs because when they're not hitting threes, they're atrocious, and that's a problem for them. So,
one guy I always liked for them was Randall. So if the Timberwolves need a cap casualty to make some room,
okay, we're not going to get into the T-Wolves on this pod. You know who would be an interesting player that I would love to see?
for Charlotte.
And this is a super random one. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I would love somebody like Jabari Smith Jr.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Like, wouldn't he
Yeah.
be a great fit alongside of them?
Yeah. Well, that's what I meant about the Bridges upgrade. Like, can you get someone like that?
Like, wouldn't he be an interesting, fun fit? And I'm not saying in any way that the Rockets are considering or even if he would be on the board, but that's the kind of guy that I like for them is a 3-and-D power forward that would make their team way better.
See, I'm thinking like a Jared Allen.
Wow.
Like, what if Cleveland, who's been in the second apron multiple seasons in a row, if they say, like, we got to trim salary, let's dump Jared Allen on some team that can just absorb him.
Yeah, and that could happen depending on how far Cleveland goes. But yeah, I'm in that with you. Like Jared Allen, Jabari Smith Jr., but they'd have to give up some serious assets to get them. So
Yeah, we'll see what happens with Cleveland, but yeah, they're going to do something. I'm
I
excited.
just wanted to throw Jabari Smith Jr. out
No,
there
I like
because
that.
I love his fit alongside those guys. You could put Kalkbrenner, Jabari Smith Jr., and then your 3 guys, and that's actually a decent, defending front court with those 3 explosive backcourt players.
What if Houston gets swept and they can make a trade for Kevin Durant?
Right. Like,
Like, what if you did something like that?
yeah. Well, no, I don't like KD on that team because the thing I love about the Hornets is their offense is so free flowing, and I don't want KD, who's such a ball dominant player. Once he gets the ball, the offense slows down and it's just him in ISO kind of doing XYZ. So I don't think they need that. KD is not what they need. I'm looking for somebody who's more of a role player who can shoot it and who can defend.
They're in a a spot similar to me that Indiana was in before they acquired Siakam, where I think they just need
Yeah, Siakam's
another
a great choice.
somebody like that where they're not going to slow the team down.
Or even like even somebody, if we want to really go down to another level, like somebody like Luke Cornett, a grown up in the room, who would be a fantastic piece for them, right? Like somebody
They're
like that.
likely going to do something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Then that would change the dynamics of that team. So
Let's move on. So I actually think let's start with the Clippers. So you've got Kawhi under contract for next year. It's the last year of his deal. And there's been whispers about the potential of the Clippers being interested in trading him. He's such an interesting asset. He had a really good year, but he may be getting suspended for who knows how long.
yeah. So what would you be happy with as a return if you were the Clippers that were willing to trade him?
Well, that's what's interesting about the Clippers is they're going to start to lean into a rebuild here. If you look at their cap situation, they have their pick situation. They have their own pick coming next year. OKC has the rights to swap it. There's a Denver pick swap mixed in there too. Both those teams are likely to be better than the Clippers, so they have an incentive to tank next season. They're actually just getting into the territory where they can start embracing being bad.
Hmm.
So that changes the math a bit where maybe you're looking for picks and a young player and cap filler, like even a bad contract is fine if you're them.
But Kawhi is coming off either a first team All NBA or a second team All NBA now that they fucked up all the rules and allowed Luca to be qualified and Cade to be qualified and probably bumped Kawhi out of first team All NBA. Had they not been eligible, he would have been first team All NBA.
Yeah, so it maybe instead of cap filler, you want that to be meaningful players that you can turn around and flip.
Wow, that's meaningful players you can turn around and flip and draft picks is what you want for Kawhi, a first team All NBA player?
On an expiring contract with the injury history he's had, it's a question mark
And the
on
suspension
how
over
much
him.
the suspension hanging over. You don't really know how much he's going to play or not play. There's the questions around how he wants the team to bend to his will, just in the way you operate.
So what would that Miami package look like? And I know we're just talking, very free flowing. You didn't think about this in advance. So I'm just wondering, is
Yeah,
Bam in
well,
that?
my
Is
my
Hero?
thinking
What is,
was like Wiggins, and I mean, I'm looking at their cap sheet now, and they don't have a lot of contracts that they can trade. They missed out on Rozier's expiring this year. They weren't able to move that money. That was going to be big as part of a superstar acquisition.
I mean, if you're the Clippers, you don't need any more guards. You need big men, forwards and centers. So
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to give up.
Bam, right?
No, you don't give up Bam to get Kawhi.
So then there's
That's
nothing. The Clippers are not going to get Norm Powell back.
they wouldn't want like Jovic and Wiggins.
Jovic was incredibly disappointing, and Wiggins. Why would you want that for
But
Kawhi?
Jovic is a young player under contract.
Yeah, but he's been utterly disappointing.
So Khalil Ware would have to be in that
Yeah,
deal?
yeah, oh, percent. It would be Where. Where would be the
Like Jovic, Ware, and Wiggins?
no? It'd probably be Where Hawkes. It would be Where Hawkes and something else. You'd have to get those guys back. If I'm the Clippers, I'm like, okay, I can potentially sell to my fans a Darius Garland, Jaime Hawkes, who's coming back to LA. He went to UCLA, and Khalil Ware, who's going to become our next big time center. That would be the trade, right?
Yeah, I mean, that works for me. It's just, like I said, the Clippers are going to start to lean into a rebuild here. Are you just going to keep doing this with Kawhi? Is that the plan, that you got younger and you're going to keep Kawhi for a few more years? Kawhi's such a mystery. Who even knows how much longer he wants to play?
Yeah, but
If you
are
think
you
about it.
fine with Hawkes and
I'm fine with
Khalil
that.
Ware?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
fine with that. And I find it hard to just think about Kawhi trade destinations.
So that would be a big come up for both teams, right? So Miami now has Tyler Hero. They keep Mitchell, who performed incredibly well during the playoffs. And then they have Kawhi, and then they have Bam. He's a kind of big time name that Miami loves. And then if I'm the Clippers, I'm like, I get Khalil Ware, who, if you open him up and let him play, which Miami really didn't do because of the weird fit with Bam, and then you're hoping Hawkes is legit, and then you get some draft picks there too. That could be interesting alongside a rebuild built around Darius Garland. But
Like Miami's in the lottery this year, so that could be involved in there
yep, that
in
could be
order
in
to
there
get the
too.
Clippers, say they don't get this Indiana pick,
Yep, great point.
right? So I think that there's a potential Kawhi move here that's not being
Oh, I
talked
like
about a
that.
lot.
That's good.
Yeah. So I think we put together a package here that makes sense for both teams. Miami would be looking at Bam, Hero, Norman Powell, and Kawhi
So
is your
are they
top four.
signing back Norm Powell? Norm Powell's an unrestricted free agent, so they probably can't absorb that contract, right? So they'd
Well,
probably have to let
they don't
Norm
have a
walk.
lot of money on the books. So
Davion Mitchell's awesome. He's only on the books next year. By my memory serves me correctly, it's somewhere around like 12 million or something like that. I think, is that right?
it's 12.4, yeah.
Oh, it's 12.4. Okay. I was a little off. And then they have Jokic or sorry,
Which
Jovic. And then they have some of these other peripheral players, but we're dovetailing on our Miami conversation. We're kind of doing it all at once, but Miami's a team that's hit an inflection point, right? Like this team, they've been holding on to all these assets. Their team name has been thrown around, with all these big time trades that have come up. They're always thrown out there, whether it's Dame Lillard, whether it's Giannis, they are always looked upon as that team, and they've never really pulled the trigger on it. So this might be the time they pull the trigger because honestly, this team is not going to get any better. What is the recourse for the Heat? If they don't do this trade, what is their ceiling and what are they doing other than this?
right. They they have all their picks for the next several years. You have this Bam and Hero combination who are in their late 20s now. Hero's 26, Bam's 28. You've had some of these young players that you have Ware who's 21. Hawkes is 24. He's not going to be looked at as this potential upside asset for much longer.
Great point.
So, and like I said,
And he's coming off a career year.
I don't think that they're in a strong position to acquire Giannis unless he forces his way there or something. And so that's why I think we're looking at a superstar trade a step below that.
And if you're the Clippers, you're like, please give me Khalil Ware. Look at all the
Right.
contract control I have over him. I have him as a restricted free agent. I have him on a team option.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the realm of like, I don't remember the number, but it's got to be like 7 to 12 million, somewhere around there.
So he's 4.5 next year. Team option after that is 7. And then he's a restricted free agent after that year.
Yeah.
So 2 more years before you have to pay him real money.
You love that if you're the Clippers. And
you're starting with Garland, Ware, and Mathurin as 3 young players for the next several years. You get a lottery pick out of this.
In the West, that they're not going to be at best, they can be a playoff team. But I want to draw similarities between the Clippers and the Suns. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, let's do that.
So talk about the Suns last year, right? The Suns last year, when they were going into the offseason, they had Kevin Durant, they had Devin Booker, and they ended up turning Kevin Durant into, what a lot of people would have considered depreciating assets in Jalen Green and Dylan Brooks. And look at the way bringing in these other 2 players changed the culture on that team. And now all of a sudden they're a playoff team. Even though they're not big time players, they brought in guys that are, and Jalen Green was injured the majority of the year, but it changed the kind of identity of the team and it built it around Devin Booker. And now all of a sudden and this Suns team is in the playoffs. And even though they're going to get swept by the Thunder and it is what it is, they clean their books. They brought in assets, and they're just a more
functioning team. Yeah.
They're just a healthier franchise. If I'm the Clippers, I'm looking to do that as well.
Yeah.
And if I'm the Heat, I'm like, I don't mind having a 15-game suspension for Kawhi because I'm in the East. I can get in there anyways.
Right. And that's why I think Miami's the sort of mature organization that's prepared to deal with whatever happens with Kawhi. I think Kawhi personally is going to be punished the least in this situation that the league's investigating, because I think they'll see him as largely like an absent party that sort of has these handlers and agents, and that's not to absolve him of accountability, but I think that the Clippers organization will be viewed at the harshest. And if Kawhi's going to get a suspension, it's like you said, some short chunk of the season, less than half for sure.
Yeah.
And Kawhi's likely to miss that time anyway.
And in terms of that, can you pull this up? Can you look this up? Can you tell me what the Clippers draft picks are? Like who owns them?
Right. So I mentioned the one for next season. They keep that. There's swap rights with OKC, and there's a Denver swap logic mixed in there. But they're likely to keep it, being, they're going to be worse than those two teams.
So there are some swap rights on it and everything.
Yeah.
So that's the reason I was going to say it's very difficult if you're the NBA to punish the Clippers by like taking away draft picks, right? Because those draft picks, you don't want to punish the Thunder or
Right.
whomever off of the Clippers' transgressions, right?
They have their own picks in 30, 31, and 32.
So
That would be the target.
that would be the target if you want to keep it very clean. If you were going to really punish them for something like this, and punish them by way of draft picks, you would like punish them by taking away those, not the most recent ones.
You would take away like 30 and 32 so you can align with the Stepien rule.
Yeah.
They'll keep their picks in 27, 29, and 31. You're right. That's a good call out. So I think given that, you're incentivized to try to maximize the 27 and 29 picks
Right.
that have these swap rights, where you want to make sure that those swap rights aren't going to convey and that you get to pick those players, because then you're in a good position with the youth that you've acquired. And I think they're actively doing this, and why we've seen the moves we've made, trading Zubats and Harden. I think they have a sense of what's going to happen and they're preparing for it.
So knowing where we're at sitting here right now, would you have made the Zubac trade?
Yeah.
Knowing it's like a less than 50% chance you actually get the
No, yeah. Because if they are going to lose their 31 pick, you want those Indiana picks. Like they have those picks from Indiana coming their way, and they needed to restock their assets. The rebuild needs to start. So
Yeah,
I
it's
think
not like having Zubac on this year's team would have made them.
no, and I said that at the time of the trade that they were going to be a first round exit no matter what. I think they were going to be the 8, 7 seed, something like that, regardless of whether they kept Harden and Zubats or not, just by virtue of all the tanking teams in the West.
Yeah.
So I think this trade makes a lot of sense for both sides, and that's why I wanted to talk about it. And I actually think the Clippers have run themselves in a smart way ever since the Kawhi and Paul George thing.
They have.
They get a lot of flack for that because it didn't work out at all. But if you just look at the moves they've made since that, given the constraints on their assets with everything owed to the Thunder, they make smart decisions and they've found a way to remain competitive. They just had a ton of injury bad luck.
And they drafted really well.
Yeah.
Miller, Niederhauser, all those guys were very good draft picks.
Yeah. So I'm actually would go as far as to say I'm expecting a Kawhi trade, and I just don't know how many locations are actually well suited.
I mean, Isaiah Jackson was he was a lottery pick by the Pacers.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
But he had a ton of injury issues.
So they have him on a good contract now.
And they have Niederhauser, who I really like. They're an interesting team. They're nowhere close to competing with the best of the West, but
they're going to have Derek Jones Jr. on an expiring. That's a nice contract to trade.
Yeah, and John Collins is going to be a nice contract to trade as well. He's on
no, he expired this year.
They're just going to let him walk.
Yeah.
Yes. So they're clearing their books, but this all signs point to this next year being a complete rebuild.
Yeah.
For the Clippers, right?
Right.
Whereas on the other hand, Miami is not in that realm. Miami is in the exact opposite realm where they're heavily leveraged, where they have to be competing because what other choice do they have, right?
And I've made the point about Miami before that Miami's okay giving up depth to make trades because they are confident in their ability to find contributors. Case in point, Davion Mitchell, who got passed around a few different teams that couldn't find value in him, and he was their starter.
But is there any realm where maybe Miami doesn't want to go that crazy?
I mean, and just basically run it back. They could, but I think that they're going to make some sort of star acquisition.
Yeah, and I don't ascribe by this view. I actually think this is going to be the offseason where they push all the chips into the table. But is there a realm where I'm wrong and they actually do just kind of run it back and just keep waiting?
I think if they weren't going to push in, the reason would be that they're doing an organizational transition away from Pat Riley, and they're going to bring someone else in and basically look to move Bam or look to move Hero and basically turn the page where they no longer are necessarily going to operate the way that we've seen the last so many years.
What do you think about Tyler Hero? So he's only got one more year guaranteed on his contract. So
He's certainly being paid more than the second apron would dictate. That I don't think he's a $30 million player. I think he's a quality starter.
would you rather have him than Norm Powell? Because,
Yeah,
yeah, you would,
yeah,
right?
I would.
Yeah, I would too.
But Norm Powell had a good year for them. I think they're going to re-sign him.
No, I don't think they are. I
They
don't
don't.
think
They're
they're
not
going to.
paying very many people.
Norm Powell might be involved in like a sign and trade, maybe. But I don't think they're going to pay him because he's going to, well, he cost himself a shit ton of money because Eric Spoelstra didn't even play him down the stretch in the playoffs. Like he didn't even play. He was like literally watching as his money burnt into flames. So it was a rough end of the season for Norm Powell, who started off incredibly well and was like, he looked great going into the All-Star, and then it all fell apart for him.
So let's say they do the Kawhi trade. They would be saying, we're going to roll with Davion Mitchell, Hero, some other, wing, like maybe a Pell Larson or Jovic with Kawhi and Bam.
So if I was very shrewd, if I was the Miami Heat, I don't necessarily know if I would love to give up that Khalil Ware contract. It's, to my knowledge, what I remember, it's not a lot of money that he's owed. And it's hard to walk away from somebody like Khalil Ware, who's making like $10 million a year and is like a stalwart on defense and is an incredible defender. Pretty much like every single team in the NBA would want him to have complete team control over him. To think that they could give up like 4 years of guaranteed control over him to bring in an aging Kawhi, that's rough. So I just wanted to mention that. And same thing with Hawkes. They drafted him too.
So you wouldn't do the deal if you were Miami.
It's tough. I think Pat Riley does the deal. But if I was like a younger GM trying to look towards like 5 years from now, I would not do it.
Would you look at shopping Bam?
Problem is, Bam is such a integral part of.
So maybe Hero would be the guy who'd get
I
shopped.
hate to use this phrase. I really hate it. But Heat culture, he's such an integral part of that. That's just who he is. It's hard to walk away from him.
Yeah.
I mean, what is Bam going to get you? What do you think? What is the best return you would get for Bam?
Yeah, you'd get several picks and a young player. It's the same superstar kind of trade. He's on a
I mean, he's on a reasonable deal.
$50 million range, which is about what second best player on the team makes these days.
If I can be honest, I think the Heat are largely celebrated amongst NBA fans as being this very sexy, awesome, beautiful place to go. Kind of on the same realm as the Lakers, but they got very lucky with the whole Dwayne Wade, LeBron, Chris Bosh situation. They also got very lucky when they were somehow able to get Shaq. I don't think that those were necessarily like genius moves to the extent like the Thunder predicting SGA was going to become the MVP in the league. So I say all that just to say, I don't necessarily think that this Miami Heat team is going to be incredibly good anytime soon.
It's unlikely, but Miami has the only time they were really bad was when they took Beasley at number 2. They're always competing, and that's just the way they've run the organization. And that's why I say I don't expect them to actually go the other direction toward a rebuild unless it also coincides with Pat Riley moving on.
So give me a exciting team that you're looking forward to next year. As we end this pod, give me a team that you're like really looking forward to what this team is going to look like. There's 2 for me. It's the Jazz and it's the Wizards. I think that those are going to be 2 very interesting teams. Both teams kind of sacrificed this year to get into this draft, which makes all the sense in the world because the draft after this don't look great. And the Jazz have a shit ton of talent with Ace Bailey, Jaren Jackson, Lowry Markkanen, Keontae George. I mean, that is a loaded team, and they're about to get potentially a top 5 pick in the draft. Imagine if they got like Darren Peterson and they just were able to roll that guy out. I mean, they're going to be a fun team next year. And then the other one is, who did I mention?
You said Washington.
Yeah, Washington. I mean, Washington's going to be so intriguing. They have Trey Young, they have Anthony Davis, they have Alex Sarr. They're going to have a top 5 pick in this draft. And they have Trey Johnson from last year, who's a sharpshooter. Those are going to be two teams that I'm really looking forward to as being teams that could potentially vault themselves. And I think they did that intentionally because they knew the draft afterwards would not be good into like playoff contention.
So I'm messy. I'm most looking forward to the teams that are going to engage in some moves that I'm likely going to see as desperate or not agree with. So I'm actually most intrigued to see throughout the summer what happens with the Knicks,
Mm.
Houston. There's so many possibilities with those two situations. And then I really just want to see this Giannis thing come to an end. So what's Milwaukee look like next year?
Oh,
Does he come back on the team, or are they going to make this a drama throughout the whole year? We'll see. But those are the three situations that look the most uncertain to me. All right. Well, thanks for joining me to talk about the other play-in losers. So I've now covered 4 of the lottery teams on this pod and even briefly talked about some others thanks to your question there at the end. We're going to order some DoorDash. This was fun. Thanks for joining, Cake. Anything you want to say before we hang up?
I'm happy you guys follow this channel. It's an incredible channel. It's very insightful. And I hope you keep supporting my boy.